This is ILM Circle, a learning workshop presented by the Islamic Speakers Bureau of Arizona, or ISBA. ILM stands for Intentional Learning for Mutual Respect, the foundation of what ISBA is all about.
Thank you everybody for coming in on time. We so appreciate it. Assalamu alaikum, shalom, and peace to everybody. My name is Uzma Jaffrey. I am your moderator tonight at the Islamic Speakers Bureau of Arizona's ILM Circle for the evening. I'm super excited to not only serve in the capacity of a certified speaker for the Bureau, but also get to moderate fun events like this from the comfort of my home. How awesome is that? And thank you for joining from the comfort of yours during these very important ILM circles, which we hope will give us all a peek into things that we don't really know about and maybe are too shy to ask about sometimes. This month's ILM Circle welcomes you to tonight's presentation, or the talk for the evening, which is Paganism, what you wanted to know, but were afraid to ask, because how many of our friends actually say that they're pagan? I have none. So I'm super excited about this one. Our presenter tonight is the Reverend Darren Reale. Reverend Darren Reale is an ordained Wiccan priest with the Sacred Spiral Pagan Church in Mesa, and he is also currently the leader of a new pagan worship group, Spirit of the Sacred Journey, at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Surprise. Reverend Darren began studying shamanism in 1985 with Joseph Wilson of the Temple of the Elder Gods, later learning Wicca from Ellen Reed in 1986, and in the early 90s with Isaac Bonowitz, Raymond Buckland, and later with Joe Besancourt, learning the use of music and magic as a bard in the Druid tradition for the next 18 years. This sounds so cool, especially because I'm really into like Highland literature right now, like the Druid, loving it. In 2016, he studied with the Reverend Rosemary Zemansky Lockett of the Sacred Spiral Pagan Church, completing a 2-year formal studies program for priesthood into the Wiccan faith, becoming an ordained Wiccan in February 2018. Since then, he's conducted workshops on the pagan faith at the Phoenix Pagan Pride yearly events in Phoenix, and has had the wonderful privilege to perform and conduct several public Wiccan rituals for the full moons, high holy days, weddings, hand fastings, coming of age rituals, house blessings, and a Wiccan baby blessing. Please welcome Reverend Darren Reale for tonight. Welcome, Reverend Darren.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm very honored to be your guest speaker tonight. Well, before I begin, I'd like to give a couple thank yous. Thank you to ASRA and the Islamic Speakers Bureau for contacting Sacred Spiral Pagan Church and inviting me here. Joseph, I hope I said his last name right, Balian, who's running our tech, and of course, Uzma, who is our moderator tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Just one really quick thing for housekeeping. If everybody could mute their microphones upon entering, that would be awesome. And then if you have any questions, just put them in the chat. I am screening through, and we will have time for a Q&A at the end of Reverend Darren's presentation. And I will mute myself. It's all yours, Reverend Darren.
Okay. All right. Well, welcome to our unique presentation tonight, which is everything you always wanted to ask a pagan, but we're afraid to ask. Here I am. It's kind of amazing how I ended up here. You probably heard the brief introduction. When I was 10 years old, I started reading Bullfinch's mythology, and I became fascinated by all the gods and goddesses that were there in the pantheons of the ancient Greeks, stories of Zeus and Hera. And I felt sorry for these entities because I thought, all the pagans are dead. They all died in ancient times. There's none of them left. And as I was sharing with Uzma earlier, when you're 10 years old, your view on the existence of the world is like about this big. You don't know everything. And so I started praying, and guess what? I started getting an answer. I felt an incredible pull to the various directions of the compass, the earth, and the energies around me. And years later, here I am speaking about it as a quote unquote expert. Although I will never truly feel like I'm an expert in this field. I feel that a true expert realizes they're still the student learning it all. So I hope what I share tonight is of interest. Okay, here we go. What's a pagan? What exactly is a pagan? Well, if you jump on the Oxford Dictionary, it tells you that a pagan is, well, it's a noun, and it means, especially in historical context, a person holding religious beliefs other than those of the main or recognized religions. Such as the incoming Germanic peoples were pagans. Similar, see heathen. And that tells you what paganism is. It's amazing to kind of think about paganism in this context, because if a paganism, anybody outside of the main religions, that would all of a sudden make the Hindus with their pantheons of the various gods and goddesses they follow pagans also. So it looks like the pagan faith is a series of many, many faiths around the world, and not just one particular unified faith. Anyway, as pagans, as I mentioned earlier, I felt a connectedness to the earth. And in many ways, all pagans who follow this path, they feel that connectedness to the earth. The earth is something special. Walking out into the forest at night, feeling this unseen existence of something above and beyond anything that's of comprehension, or looking at the Grand Canyon for the first time. Lack of words, there's just this feeling of awe and power and energy that is indescribable. What is that all? Or looking at the heavens, the Milky Way, seeing that of creation, wondering, how did this all come into existence? What is involved here? And feeling that sense of being one with it, but at the same time, an energy almost indescribable. So in many ways, pagans feel a sense of connectedness to all of creation, especially of the earth. Many of you who may be familiar with aspen trees that grow in certain areas may not know that they are considered by biologists to be one of the largest living organisms on Earth. How? They are all interconnected. All of their roots are interconnected. In fact, many of them are clones of each other. And one gigantic root system that goes on for miles and miles and miles underground through all these various forests that go on for miles and miles, especially in the northern Arizona area, extending out into New Mexico. I don't know if any of you have ever had the chance to see an aspen tree, but when one starts to change color, guess what? All of them, the thousands and thousands and thousands of them across all these forests, they're all changing colors at the exact same time. They're all one gigantic interconnected organism. Well, just like the aspen trees, we're all interconnected to the earth. This is what pagans believe. And pagans have many beliefs. One of the main ones are that we are a part of the earth, and we're not here to subjugate it. We're to work with it, work with its energies, work with its existence. Many pagans, as I mentioned, we believe earth is a living, divine entity, and also we hold a belief in a pantheon or group of various entities, which we refer to as gods and goddesses, or as some, a god, a triple god, a god and a goddess. I'll get into that in just a little bit. These energies that we feel, we call that magical energies, the power of the elements, the four directions. Where do we get these energies from? Feeling nature around us, seeing nature around us, holding perhaps a crystal, holding perhaps a special rock, holding something of the earth itself, feeling a connectedness to it, a unique energy that's almost indescribable, a sense to a connectedness, as I mentioned earlier, to the moon, to the planets, the stars, and all creation. And most pagans will tell you they're sensitive to these various energies, which many people would call the quote unquote supernatural. Many modern day pagans, including a number of modern day witches today, believe in the duality of a divine Earth Mother. The Earth Mother being part of one section of existence in balance with what is called the Sky Father. The Earth Mother being the one that receives the energy from the sun, from the heavens, bringing forth all life and all existence. It's also believed that the Earth Mother is the creator of all the universe, with the Sky Father being a part of this existence. An existence of belief that the energy of creation is not just one, but of many. The Earth Mother is also represented by many pagans here on our plane of existence as the moon, and the Sky Father represented by a duality, the sun, as well as being the god of the hunt in the forest. The Sky Father is seen as aging by pagans during the solar year, as the days grow shorter and shorter during the fall and early winter, symbolically dying on the winter solstice, only to be reborn again by the Earth Mother. Modern day paganism and its revival today actually goes back to the 1950s and its growth period through the 1970s. It grew out of a movement of concern for the Earth Mother And also, many people were leaving mainstream religions seeking a different path to the divine. They felt that the restrictions of the faith that they were a part of just didn't really cover what they were looking for. So many turned to paganism for this reason. Gerald Gardner in England created a system of worship based on reverencing the four cardinal points of the compass: north, the south, east, and west, the divine goddess of all creation, and her consort, the sun god, as I mentioned, also seen as the god of the forest and the animals. Gerald Gardner took the circle and ceremonies adapted from English men's fraternities at the time to create a very unique form of worship. And it's still used in its various forms today by many pagans, called Gardnerian witchcraft. Now, he wasn't able to come forth with this right away when this, we're talking about the 1930s and 40s, when this was being created by him. It wasn't until the 1950s, when in 1951, the witchcraft law was finally repealed in England. And there was actually a couple laws on the books. They were repealed thinking, we are living in a modern age, we have no need for this anymore. So once the witchcraft laws were repealed, he published in 1954 a book called Witchcraft Today. And this book opened the door for many people to see what a witch did in their rituals. And this was a male witch, not the typical stereotypical woman witch. It was actually a man. Now, that was just for his particular system of worship and his form of witchcraft. Now, before I get any further talking about witchcraft and witches and pagans in general, let me dispel a few myths that many people have. I'm very glad for this forum because it gives me a chance to say, this is Hollywood, and this is reality, and this is just a bunch of made-up hooey. You folks ready? Here we go. Myth number one. Witches are all women, and men are called warlocks, like in the old TV show Bewitched. Not true. Warlock is actually an ancient Scottish word meaning oath breaker. For those pagans that follow the Wiccan path, both the men and women refer to themselves as witches. Myth number two. Pagans worship the devil. Not true. Pagans don't even believe in the devil. They see all creation as divine and worship instead the Earth Mother and Sky Father, and, depending on the pagan, also a pantheon of gods and goddesses, and that can vary depending on the pagan. Another myth, witchcraft is evil. Not true. Witchcraft actually means craft of the wise, and originally referred to the ancient village wise woman and wise men who were healers and sharers of divine wisdom of their day, using various cures that were herbalism and an early form of early pharmaceutical science, which at that time was being developed by them. Witchcraft never was evil in its actual use as was intended by many. In fact, the art and practice of focusing natural, neutral energy and directing this energy to cause a change using one's will and natural energies from nature around us, in addition to divine assistance from the various gods and goddesses, is what this is all about. It's not turning people into frogs or flying on broomsticks. That's all Hollywood. In fact, a spell is a prayer. Another myth. All pagans have a black cat and use it as a familiar to increase their magic. Well, that's not true. You know why? I own 2 black cats, not just one. I own 2. Little joke there, but very sincerely, animals are loved by pagans. It's not the fact that we get an animal to be familiar to use for magical energy increasing, although some feel that connection. Many pagans own quite a few pets of their own choice, and we do put a lot of love in the taking care of our animals and pets. Another myth. Probably seen this when pagans wear those pointed hats, black clothing with heavy black makeup. Did you know the pointed hat is actually from the Middle Ages, making fun of women at the time who wore out-of-date headdress styles, such as those of the 11th and 12th centuries? You've probably seen the old pictures in books about King Arthur with the ladies with long, tall, pointed hats. Well, old women were depicted as wearing hats of that style, a little shorter and with a broad brim, to go ahead and make them seem out of touch with reality. It's actually a put down, believe it or not. Now, one thing that is true is that pagans, we are fond of our jewelry, and we do like our rings and you can see me wear some of my necklaces. This is something I've noticed about us that we're just in tune with. We love wearing various jewelries. Now, here's another famous myth. You have to have a special magic wand to do magic. It's got to be of that special wood that has been blessed in a special place using special words to cause a magic thing to happen. No, not true. Items like this magic wand, it's a stick, has no power at all. Made out of wood. This was made on a lathe. Pretty piece of Purple Heart wood that was turned on a lathe. And it's more like someone just focusing their mind and pointing their finger. That's what we use these for. And they have no magic on their own, none whatsoever. None whatsoever. The magic is actually in the person who is trying to use it and focus the energy. In fact, many of you have seen the wizard's staff. That's just simply a large version of a wand. In fact, many pagans don't use a wand at all. Another myth. Pagans are amoral. They capture people. We do blood sacrifices and eat babies. Boy, is this one not true. Modern day pagans do nothing of the sort. This is all Hollywood again. In fact, according to one pagan, Nancy Aloka, who's a priestess and longtime member of Sacred Spiral Pagan Church, she shared that pagans have the hardest moral rule of all to follow. And at harm none, do as ye will. And at harm none, do as you will. Well, this means that you can't do anything that would hurt anyone, not even yourself. I like to use the analogy of that means I don't get to binge on a whole bunch of potato chips and 5 big bowls of popcorn watching a movie, because that would be something that would harm me. That would harm myself. I'm putting too much stuff into my body all at once that's not good for me. It's junk food. Moderation in all things, saith the Greeks. So true. And it also means, for example, driving on the highway and somebody cuts you off on the road, instead of pointing your finger and swearing at them, you just put negative energy out into the world. We're not allowed to do that. We're not supposed to do that. We believe anything we put out comes back to us threefold. So instead of yelling and screaming or swearing at somebody, next time they cut you off in traffic, say, "Bless you, sir or ma'am. Please learn to drive better," and give a positive thought. You never know what might happen. We don't do curses. That's another myth. Witches and pagans, like I said, believe what you put out, you get back threefold. Here's another myth. You must be a pagan or a witch or a wizard to cast a spell and do magic, and you must use specific magical words. Not true. A spell is actually a prayer, as I mentioned earlier, using various elements to convey one's will to cause a change. They can be as simple or as complicated as you desire, using the language one is most familiar with. In fact, many like to use words that contain rhymes in it. Did you know that most of you have probably already done a magical spell using candle magic? Remember a time when it was your birthday and you made a wish with all your might, with all your will, you closed your eyes and you blew out the candle to make that wish. Well, guess what? You've just done candle magic. You don't have to be a pagan to do magic. And here's the last myth I'll share for today. Pagans all meet in a group they call a coven. Not true. Many pagans, in fact, are solitary. They worship by themselves. They work alone. A group of witches can call themselves, or a group of pagans can call themselves anything they wish. A circle, an order, a grove. In fact, if they want, even a church. For us at Sacred Spiral Pagan Church, that's exactly what we call ourselves, a church. We're 501(c) recognized group of people. There are also groups within, for example, the Unitarian Universalist Church called CUPS chapters, which stands for the Covenant of Unitarian Universalist Pagans. And they have various names located in various places. In fact, I just got the privilege of being part of one that started out here in Surprise, Spirit of the Sacred Journey. So now that I've covered a little as to what pagans don't do, let me talk about what we do. Many pagans try to get together as they can to celebrate the 13 full moons each year. Each of these moons is called an SBOT. And our other important days are the 8 times of the year that celebrate what we call the high holy days or Sabbats. In fact, tomorrow is one of them. Tomorrow is the summer solstice here in the Northern Hemisphere, the longest day of the year, 21st of June, when the sun will be in the sky for the longest time. At its opposite end is the winter solstice, which is what we call Yule. It's the shortest day of the year and the longest night. In between these, at right around March 21st, 22nd, and also around September 21st, 22nd, are what we call the equinoxes, where the Earth is in balance for 12 hours of sunlight each day, each part of the day and each part of the night. So, correction, 12 hours of sunlight, 12 hours of nighttime during this, where the Earth is in balance, an equal existence, hence the name equinox. Now, you know these equinoxes and solstices by better names. You know them as spring, summer, winter, fall. First day of winter is the winter solstice. The first day of spring is the spring equinox. The summer, that's the summer solstice. First day of fall, that's the fall equinox. Now, got a question for you. What does Groundhog Day, May Day, August 1st, and Halloween all have in common? Well, the pagan calendar are all called the cross-quarter days and are part of the wheel of the year, or Sabbats, and they're high holy days in their own right. In fact, let's start with what is known as the Celtic year. The Celtic New Year, which is followed by many pagans, starts on actually the eve of Halloween, which is the 31st. Halloween actually stands for All Hallowed Evening, by the way. So here we have the day, which is literally halfway between the first day of winter and the first day of fall. So starting on Halloween, that's the first part of our wheel of the year. Our next major holiday that we have is, of course, Yule, which is around the 20th, 21st of December. Next is what we call Candlemas, or Imbolc, and that is on the 1st of February. That's halfway between, guess what? First day of winter, first day of spring. Lights are just starting to be lit, and spring is just barely starting to show. In fact, in many places around the world, daffodils are finally starting to bloom, the very first clue that spring is right around the corner. And then next is what we call Ostara, where the word Easter comes from. Ostara is the first day of spring, of the 22nd, 21st of March. Next, going on the wheel of the year, we have got May Day, which is the 1st of May. That's called Beltane, halfway between spring and summer. Summer, which is, of course, our high holy day tomorrow, is called Litha, longest day of the year. And then the next cross-quarter day is called, oh goodness, blank, Lughnasadh, named after Lu, who was a Celtic god. In fact, he was the god of many trades that were mastered. He was the master of all masters in the Celtic mythology. So Lu is there, right halfway between Lughnasadh, where loaves are made, breads are made and shared in our festivals. And that's halfway between first day of spring, correction, first day of summer, first day of fall. First day of fall is known as Mabon. And then we brings us all the way back, beginning of the wheel of the year again, All Hallowed Evening, Halloween, halfway between spring, first progression, half day between first day of fall and first day of winter. So that is a little bit about what our holidays are. The 8 major high holy days of the year, and then the moons, which we celebrate during the full time of the moon. Now, for a lot of pagans, in fact, the moon is venerated on 3 days: the day before, the day of the full moon, and the day after. We see that as the actual time of the full moon for our celebrations, with the full moon being the most powerful of the times. In fact, most pagan gatherings I've been to have got anywhere from like just a few people to 10 to as many as 50 to 500 or more coming together for these celebrations. In England, one of the world's biggest gatherings is there at Stonehenge on the first day of winter and also the first day of summer, which is, of course, tomorrow. In fact, I think right about now at this time, let's see, we are right now as it stands, where I'm here in Arizona time, so we are 8 hours behind England. They're actually starting their celebrations as of quite a long time ago, and they're now running a special program. If you want to look at it, you can actually tune into the British Heritage Society's presentation, which is following Stonehenge and sunrise occurring at Stonehenge. They record the whole thing the entire night. Quite an amazing thing. How do pagans worship? To worship in a building? We can. Most pagans like to worship outside. in a forest, in an outside gathering, wherever possible. We gather in a circle around a central altar. In fact, that's why many pagan gatherings are called circles, because everybody is in a circle in order to share a sense of equality. Instead of having just one person up front and a whole bunch of people behind, as you might see in a lot of congregational groups, we sit in a large circle. And if there's not enough room, we make another circle around that, another circle around that. So circles within circles within circles as necessary to accommodate people. What do we have on our little altar there? Well, it can be almost anything. I'll share that with you right now. What can be on a pagan altar? It depends on the pagan. You can have various little statues or statuettes representing the various gods and goddesses of your pantheon. It could be Greek. You could have a statue of Hera, statue of Zeus. It could be Egyptian. You could have a statue of a Ra, of Osiris, the Bast. It could be Roman. You have a statue of Jupiter and of Juno. It could be Norse, where you have a statue of Thor, Odin, Frigga, Thor's mother, Loki, etc. It can be whatever group of gods or goddesses that a particular pagan feels a calling to. That is their particular pantheon. So we have statues on the altar, and you might find for people that are Wiccan, that's one branch of paganism, a couple of candles. One is white, like this one here, and it can be on any kind of candle stand. Another one next to it, which is yellow. White represents the goddess, yellow or gold represents the god. Again, this varies from pagan to pagan, altar to altar. We also find this symbol right here, which is called a pentagram. Pentagram represents air, earth, fire, water, spirit, and all being bound together in a circle. Pentagrams, by the way, for people who are pagans, are always upright. They're not inverted. That's Satanism, which has nothing to do with paganism, although many people and many, oh goodness, television shows and movies would want to try and make you think otherwise. What else is on our altar? You might find something representing the various directions, such as north, south, east, and west. Well, in paganism, we like to start with the east, where the sun rises. And there we have, in my faith, the Wiccan faith, we use a bell representing, which we ring and acknowledge the entities, and we're called watchtowers or the guardians of the east. We honor then those entities of the south, the watchtowers of the south, which we represent by fire. And fire for us is incense. Lit, and one person may carry this around the circle, acknowledging the fact that there is incense there and fire. In fact, it's kind of amazing when you look at a candle. Candle is air, earth, fire, and all in one. And of course, the liquid is looking like water, which is amazing. Next, we've got over at the west. West is represented by water. Chalice representing the goddess, water in a form of container, poured in libation all the way around the circle itself, as water is represented and called for. And earth can be represented by anything. It can represent a stone. That's to the north, by the way. And in our particular group, we like to use salt, taking salt and putting that around the circle. All that's tied together with spirit. We light a special little candle that's colored purple, and in our faith, in order to represent spirit in the center of the altar. And then last but not least, the god and goddess, which you've already seen, the candles there, the gold and the yellow, and their spirit is asked to come and join the circle itself. And that is a little bit about what we have on our altar. Again, this can vary from person to person. A person could use a wand if they wanted to cast what's called a circle before we begin in order to contain the energy, or they could use a special knife which they've blessed, called an athame. It can be any kind of knife whatsoever. It doesn't have to be a special one. I know some kitchen witches that love to use a butter knife because that represents for them the whole idea of what a knife could be as far as an athame. Again, these are just tools. Now, on various altars, you also might find things such as this. This happens to be a rose quartz on a small stand. Rose quartz, in this case, representing the heart, and pink being special to love. You might find this used on one of our high holy days, such as that, right around the time of Imbolc, which is right near the time of Valentine's Day, representing the heart and love being shared, and the heart and faith in the goddess to bring back the spring again. When you're living out in a place like I lived in Pennsylvania years ago, where there's winter everywhere for 5, 6 months of the year, and it's colder than your fridge when you walk outside, oh boy, you're looking for any sign of spring. You're so grateful for having it, for what that's worth. So those are some of the tools we use on our altar. And again, this can vary from pagan to pagan and group to group. By the way, our rites are led by a man and a woman, or just a woman, or just a man. We recognize women as being equal, and we call them a priestess in our faith. Men are called simply priests. We don't have just one single minister unless that's the only person available. Usually we ask for another person to come up and join if necessary. So we have a sense of duality. Many pagans and witches like to wear the pentagram. I've already described to you what that means there: air, earth, fire, water, and spirit. In fact, the pentagram, if I can share that with you, it has a very long history in paganism. There were once symbols used in ancient Greece and Babylonia. Pythagoras and his followers, you've probably heard of the Pythagorean theorem, the inventor of geometry. Anyway, Pythagoras and his Greek followers in the 6th century BCE, they used the pentagram as a symbol of mutual recognition, of well-being, and to recognize good deeds and charity. The symbol was actually once used during the Middle Ages. I did my research, found out that represented the 5 wounds of Jesus. Today, the symbol is widely used by many pagans, witches, and Wiccans. It's not a symbol of the devil, although, like I said, many movies and popular films would like to make you think so. It's inverted, and that's how you see it. We don't do that. Like I said, we wear the pentagram right side up. You might see someone who's pagan wearing what appears to be an ornate upside-down T. That group is a follower of the Norse pantheon, and they like to be called heathens. They follow the path of Odin and Thor and Norse heathenry, which involves the worship of the Nordic and North Germanic entities, and they have their own system of worship. Bloats, special ceremonies to go ahead and honor the various gods and goddesses and deities. And there is actually a prayer that we know of, and most pagan prayers, except for some of the Greek ones and some from Babylonia and Egypt, have been lost to us. But we did have actually someone who was an Arab Muslim who traveled north up the river, north of the Black Sea, where he ran into a group of Viking traders in the 9th, 10th century. And he got to watch a Viking funeral, and he wrote it down. And it's one of the few ceremonies we actually know of the ancient Norse. Thank you so much, sir, for doing that for us, because without that, we would not have a piece of history knowing about what that ancient faith once did. Like I said, most of them like to be called heathens. You might find a pagan wearing a robe or a hooded cloak at a ritual, but most of us, we choose just whatever's comfortable to wear. We do love our crystals, our religious jewelry. We also like to do divination, which involves scrying, looking at a round, clear glass ball, or you've seen it in movies, a crystal ball, or that's called scrying, or using tarot cards, using a calm approach to try and deduce what might be the possible direction one should divinely take. Paganism, like I said earlier, involves a lot of earth-centered faiths. And they don't involve just witches and the Norse people, but they also involve Native American beliefs. And there are many that follow what are called earth-centered religions, which can be considered pagan by many, such as Native American beliefs, animism, Druidry, and I'll talk about that in just a second. Heathenism I talked about, following a pantheon of gods and goddesses, the various types of Wicca. I mentioned Gardnerian Wicca, just to name a few. In fact, if you Google earth-centered spirituality in Wikipedia, you're going to find one of the best concise definitions I've ever run across about what exactly is that. Earth-centered religions, or nature worship, is a system of religion based on the veneration of natural phenomena. It covers any religion that worships the earth, nature, on fertility, deity, such as the various forms of goddess worship, or matriarchal religion. That's courtesy of Wikipedia. Now, matriarchal religion is one you may not be familiar with. It is one which is centered around a divine female entity or entities, as opposed to many other mainstream faiths which just have a central divine male entity or entities. The pantheon, that gods and goddesses that many pagans worship today, can be the ones that were worshipped at one time by the ancient Greeks, Egyptians, Norse, and Celtic peoples, just to name a few. In fact, one of the fastest growing of the neo-pagan religion paths is that of Wicca, followed by today's modern-day witches. Modern-day Wicca, modern-day Druidism, is actually a recent development. It was actually developed here in the last 50 years. So we are a fairly young religion with very, very, very old roots. So much has been lost. When I was talking earlier about Druidry, I'll speak on that for a minute because I'm a member of the Grove of the Rising Phoenix as a Druid. I would like to share that we know so little about them. Their existence was almost totally wiped out, except for what their enemies wrote about them. Ancient Greeks, and believe it or not, Julius Caesar taught us a lot about it. Without them, we wouldn't know about a ceremony involving a golden sickle cutting down mistletoe, for example. We would not know about many of the ancient stories of Ireland, of their worship of the various gods and goddesses in northern Britain, and the people who are of the Celtic tribes. That includes people who are of Scottish, Irish descent, the Welsh, the Cornish, as well as the Bretons of northern France. If it wasn't for the various Christian monks in Ireland who wrote down stories that they heard, the ancient pagan stories, they wrote down a lot of them. So we have bits and pieces of myth that allow us to take a little glimpse into what that existence of paganism might have been for the people back then, and their various gods and their various goddesses. Druidry is, in fact, a new modern day invention of what little we do know about it. In fact, most of the stuff that most Druids do today is all made up. They meet what are called circles. There are some major groups that follow this. Two of the largest that I'm aware of is the group called the Order of the Bard, Ovates and Druids in England, a group of pagans that have got a very formal scholarship approach to learning about Druidry. And another group in America called Ondracht Fang that was started by the late Isaac Bonwitz. But there are groups that have felt that this was not for them. They've started their own groups instead, following their own personal beliefs or set of beliefs that they felt were close to what they felt attuned to in nature. So, do pagans believe in specific things? Well, this can vary much depending on the person, the spiritual path, since pagans don't share all the same practices, one set of beliefs, or even a specific set of religious texts. There's no specific creed or book or sacred writings used. In fact, many learn on their own from books about paganism or from a teacher for that particular form of paganism, whether it be Wicca, shamanism, Druidry, also true Norse heathenism, Egyptian, Hellenic, Greek, Italian Stregheria, or kitchen witchery, eclectic witchcraft, just to name a few. It's traditional not to charge for these teachings. In fact, most pagans are voracious readers. Many, as said earlier, are self-taught in the ways of paganism and its theory, practicum, rituals, philosophies, spell work, and spirituality. There is something that many witches follow. It's called the Wiccan Rede, written by a very famous English witch back in the 1960s, which outlines the various facets of what one should do, what should follow, followed by, and this the Wiccan Rede fulfilled. The very last part says, and this sums it up, and it harm none, do what she will. That means I'm so restricted in what I do and think it's not even funny. I will not lie to anyone about anything, no matter how much it may hurt, because I will not stand before the goddess of creation and explain to her that I fibbed on a Tuesday evening to all you folks out there. I will not dare do that. Do not want those karmic karmic repercussions. There we go. Pardon me for being tongue-tied there. So that's something that's very unique to paganism, a very strict code of morals to follow, and harm none, do what you think best. You spend the rest of your life trying to figure out what that means. Most pagans believe that the world is a place of joy, of life, not of sin and suffering. Many believe in the freedom of the individual to seek their own specific path in paganism, astrology, the spirits of nature, including fairies, using various divination elements, such as reading the ancient Norse runes, reading tea leaves, looking in a crystal ball, tarot cards, etc., just to name a few. Many believe in the freedom of an individual to seek their specific path in paganism, but with a serious responsibility to take care of the Earth Mother. By the way, the word pagan, I defined it earlier. It comes from a Latin word meaning paganus, which means a country dweller or one living out in the city. I've used the word Wicca many times. Wicca comes from the Old English word meaning witche is pronounced W-I-C-C-E, which sounds like the word witch today, meaning wise one. Now, you may be surprised to find out that in jolly old England, the last person convicted for witchcraft was in September 1943. I'm not making this up. Can you imagine that? During wartime England, 1943, Helen Duncan was convicted and imprisoned for 9 months under the Witchcraft Act of 1735 in England, on the grounds that she had claimed to summon spirits. And as I mentioned earlier, in 1951, the British government removed and did away with the Witchcraft Act, opening the way for Gerald Gardner to finally publish his book. There are some last minute points I'd like to share, and then I thought we'd take some questions if that's okay. Unless, Luzma, do you want me to stop right here and we'll take any questions that are there? Do you want me to continue? I have a few more things I can say.
I think you have a few more minutes.
Okay.
So if you have some more points, why don't we hit them? Because maybe we'll answer a few more questions.
You got it. You got it. Many pagans feel that the phases of the moon, as the moon is what's called waxing, that means every day getting a little larger and brighter in the sky. That's the time to do our spell work prayers, spell work for things that are increasing, such as, say, I want to improve my physical health. So during the phase of the moon, when it's increasing, I would say, God, please give me the strength and energy to do more exercises and stay motivated so I can continue to go to that gym every day to do what I need to do. And then when the moon is at its fullest and then starting to wane and get a little less visible in the sky, becoming less and less and less till there's nothing there, and then we have a new moon. At that time, when the moon is waning, we switch, and our prayers go to, God, please give me the courage to eat less. Please give me the courage to reduce the calories that I take. Please make me reduce the bad choices I may have in what I should do in order to get my body fit and stay in shape. We have a way of working both with the waxing and the waning moon in this way. This is just an example. That guy asked and did a spell that I would please go to the gym and work out, and did it during the waxing of the moon here about 3 months ago. And I'm not kidding you. Every morning I woke up, gym time, gym time, gym time. Never in my life. I'm 62 years of age. Finally, I've been able to get the motivation to go to the gym. I've lost 20 pounds, and I hope I can continue to do so. Because my doctor says, hey, you're diabetic, baby. You got to lose the weight. So I'm working very hard. I hope I can shed another 40, 50 pounds and be a lot lighter. So a little bit about moon spells and that. Spells can contain various elements. They can contain elements of certain herbs, elements of certain minerals. They can be done in correlation to the various astrological phases of the zodiac, with the moon passing through a specific zodiac at that time. It can also involve, for example, there is a company called The Well that puts out the witch's calendar, and every day has a specific magical color. Even if you're not able to wear that color, thinking about that lets you get into a tune with an energy field that allows you to direct, hopefully, a positive energy in a positive way to do an increase in some way. Even just thinking about the color. You don't have to wear the magical color of the day. You can just think about it. So these are elements that can be contained in spells. They can be as elaborate as one wishes them to be. For me, I have the gift of poetry, and I've been able to do a number of rhymes improvisationally. So when I go ahead and do a prayer, I often do it to a rhyme. May I speak well tonight. May I be seen well in all of your sight. May upon my words you carefully dwell, and all my words I truthfully tell. So mote it be. And that's an example of my spell work done improvisationally for you, just right here. The goddess is seen in triple phases by many Wiccans. She's seen as, in the early part of spring, as the young maiden, who then becomes the mother bringing forth all of creation, becoming older. And as she becomes the older mother, she gets to the point where she reaches old age, becoming the crone, and then passing on and becoming reborn again as the maiden all over. This is done in the phases of the moon for various faiths in Wicca, various faiths in paganism. And the sun god is seen the same way, as becoming a young child at the birth of Yule on the 21st of December, being born that day, and going forth, becoming older and becoming in full strength and virility on Beltane, and becoming middle-aged during the summer, becoming older, and finally dying and passing away on Yule, and then to be reborn again by the goddess. So it's interesting how we view the duality of the god, sun god, and god of the forest and animals, and the triple goddess, in her guise as mother, maiden, and crone. I'm giving an oversimplification here, but I hope this opens up a little bit of understanding about that. The Druids of today, I mentioned about them earlier, their group likes to have three major studies in order for one to become a Druid. They start off as a bard, learning the way of the bardic art, going on to learn the way of the seer, which is called an ovate or avate, then eventually learning how to master a lot more of the ceremonies and existences, becoming a Druid. In fact, this was something that was shared with me by one of my Druidic teachers, Mark Bailey, that one starts out becoming a bard, which takes about a good 10 to 17 years to become proficient at. And at that point, they can specialize in a specific field, getting their master's degree, as it were, going on and become Ovate, eventually, after a 20-year period, becoming a full-blown Druid. In the ancient days, the Druids did not believe in writing things down. They felt that a written word was dead. It was useless. But the spoken word memorized by someone was more important. So they worked very hard on memorizing long chains of information. And we're walking around like walking encyclopedias. Imagine somebody who had their doctorate in law, doctorate in medicine, doctorate in political science, and a doctorate in religion. Well, that's one of the Druids, and the next one has another 3 or 4 doctorates. Yeah, that's how the Druids were back in the ancient times. We also have, in addition to some of the ceremonies I shared, ceremonies of life events. When someone is born, we have a baby blessing. The baby is brought forth and is blessed within the circle of pagans, and brought forth and is raised up for all to see, and all are asked to go ahead and assist in the raising of this child, because we are a community. It's not just one person that raises a child, it's the entire group of people gathered. We have ceremonies which honor someone who is coming of age, whether a young man or a young woman. They choose for themselves a special name. We call that a naming. In the Christian faith, it's called a confirmation, but in our faith, it is called a naming ceremony, where they choose the special name which they wish to be known by in magical works, if they decide to have one. We have the ceremony I've performed the most so far. I've had the privilege of doing 5 of these. They are called marriages, which we call hand fastings, where 2 people are gathered together in a special ceremony, and they, before the ceremony, have taken a cord, which they bound together with one color, which one of them loves, another color that the other person loves, and it's tied together by a third color, which they braid together that both of them love. And this loving cord is then put around both their hands as they're both held together and tied. You heard the word tying the knot? Well, that's where it comes from. Tying the knot here is a hand fasting, which is now, thankfully, because it's been recognized by law, a legal marriage for people of the pagan faith. The two shall now become as one, as tied together. In fact, I have to share a wonderful little story here, if I can. My daughter took the hand fasting cord that my wife and I had, that was gold and silver and bronze, and she braided it with the colors of her husband-to-be, her color that she loved, and a third color. And that now very large hand fasting cord, we tied the knot for them in the inner circle of Stonehenge in England back in 2016. I got permission, and my daughter got permission from the British government for us to be there. 1 hour before they opened, we got to be in the inner circle of Stonehenge. And we were told Welcome here to England, but please touch nothing. Do nothing except leave your footprints. And there were guards watching us very closely. So much as I would have loved to have hugged one of those incredible stones, I didn't dare do it. But my daughter got married there, and I'm very glad to say it. One thing I can share about that, by the way, the ancient Druids did not build Stonehenge. It was built long before the ancient Druids even existed. Stonehenge is older than the pyramids, by the way. Getting back to our ceremonies, I talked about hand fasting and wickening and the naming. One of those ceremonies that we do, which is the sad one for me as a Wiccan priest, is a passing ceremony. I was called here the other day to go to someone who is a Norse heathen, and his family was in tears because they couldn't find anyone who could officiate for the ceremony that the person had asked for, because they were about to pass away that evening. And I did the ancient ceremony of passing from the Norse ceremony that was written down by an ancient Arab. I'm very grateful to have had that, to go ahead and allow the family to have some closure, allow that person who is passing to have that sense of closure. Many of us in the pagan community believe in what is called an afterlife. We believe in what's called the Summerland. But when we die, we pass on and go on to something else known as the Summerland, for many of us to be reincarnated from at the will and pleasure of the goddess. Well, folks, I've tried to cover a ton of things for you. I hope I was able to open up the world, letting you know that we're folks just like you who want to use positive energies to cause positive change, worshiping nature, trying to help the Earth Mother get involved with the environment, environmental causes. And now I'll turn this on back over to our lovely moderator there, Uzma, who can tell if there's any questions that I can answer for anyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. I know that I learned a whole ton, and I've got a bunch of questions in front of me, but I wanted to respect some of the questions that were typed earlier in the chat box. If anybody has any questions, please go ahead and put those on, or if you want to be brave and unmute yourself and ask yourself, then you can do that. I'm going to go ahead and read off one of these from the chat. A lot of the information that you gave, I believe in the beginning of your presentation, was about paganism. Was it mostly paganism worldwide, or was it the United States? Meaning, is paganism different from nation to nation? And I think you did kind of allude to this in later parts of your talk, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to clarify that.
Not a problem. Every place, every pagan group within every nation has a different approach that they would use. There are some general guidelines that a lot of pagans like to follow, such as the path of Wicca, the path of the Druids, the path of the ancient Norse, or a path which they find a closeness to, such as in Italy. There are a lot of people that follow the Strega or Stregarian approach to witchcraft. So it all depends from the local group on what they wish they would like to do, and it varies from country to country. Those are some of the international groups I'm familiar with. Big, strong, scholarly group of Druids out there in England that are part of the Order of the Bards, Obates, and Druids, and most of them have doctorates from Oxford and Cambridge, and they're doing as much research as they can in the ancient Celtic archaeology to try and bring forth more information for people who want to worship in that path, just for example. But every nation could have any kind of pagan worship, depending on the individual, depending on the group.
Thank you for that. And then I guess deep diving more into this international, this is another question in there. We do have paganism, like pre-organized religion. And now we talked about, we heard from you about the modern pagan movement. What does that modern pagan movement look like in ancient civilizations with a history of that ancient paganism, like India, China, other Far Eastern countries?
Oh my gosh, that would take a few college courses at the
all those PhDs,
bachelor's or master's level, depending on the group. You could study completely Egyptian. You could go into Celtic archaeology. You could go into the archaeology of the Middle East, of ancient Iran, modern day Iran, Iraq, Palestine. There's just so much. It depends on whichever one you want to look at. We do know some of the writings of the Hammurabi Code, for example. We've been able to translate some of the Egyptian information from the ancient Egyptians. We know of that. And again, that's a whole course of study right there.
Yeah.
The Norse, we have what's called the Havamal, which is actually a guidebook of all their traditions that they put together, basically a set of rules on how to be hospitable and how to be a good host, when to be a warrior, when to take care of those weaker than yourselves. So it would really all depend, but a lot of it's been wiped out. There is so much we just simply don't know. The Druids, ancient Druids, very little except what the Romans and a few Greeks wrote about them. For a lot of ancient Chinese cultures, we do know about their pantheon of gods and goddesses, as well as the pantheon of ancient, oh goodness, blank here, ancient Japan. But again, that's a college course on its own to figure and learn all about that stuff. I wish I had more time.
That sounds like a really cool one. We have a hand raised in the audience from Sally. If you want to unmute yourself and ask your question, please.
Hi, Sal.
Yes, thank you, Reverend, so much for your information. As I was listening to you, I'm a member of a progressive Christian religion here in Arizona, and I see so many parallels between us and what you're talking about, care for the earth, community, ceremonies, prayers. Some of the things that are upmost to us is not believing in a certain creed or certain requirements, but believing to follow what Jesus showed us to do, to serve others, and the overall concept in the Bible of God's favoritism toward the poor. So
Yeah.
and welcoming strangers and everyone else. So I'm just wondering, in your particular experience, are the pagan groups welcoming to refugees, LGBTQ folks, and what kind of service outreach is often done, if any?
Wow, big question. Let me see if I can answer first element of it. Most pagans are very, very open to the LGBTQ community because a lot of pagans have felt themselves outsiders because they feel these unique energies and they have been ostracized by society. They are very welcoming to those who also feel outcast. There are some pagan groups which are very closed and want to really get to know somebody first and have them go through a series of learnings before they're accepted within the group. That depends on that particular closed group. As far as outreach programs, oh boy, you better believe it. Huge ones. I would need another hour and a half to go and list all the various outreach programs done by various groups. One very large one is by a group called Covenant of the Goddess that does a huge environmental assistance. They are based in the Midwest, for example. There's large groups of pagans that get together to pick up trash or hold a major environmental project to go ahead and help the earth and bring awareness, especially Earth Day. Earth Day was a real big one. In fact, I was asked to go and preach to a church about Earth Day and what one could do to feel more in attune with what is going on with that. So I hope that's a very small, concise little answer, but it's also a big answer saying, oh my gosh, I have the answer that one of my teachers taught me. Google it. Oh my gosh, there's a lot of outreach going on.
Thank you so much for your question, Sally. I have one more in the chat box, and I mean, I'm just so in awe of these questions because they're very scholarly. I think you're going to have the same kind of answer for this one. Did the writings of Robert Graves have any influence on your interest in Druidism, specifically the reverence for the triple goddess and his yearning to return to ancient worship?
It did. Robert Graves, who I believe wrote the book called The White Goddess, which was an incredible it's as if his brain had been blasted with divine energy to go ahead and write all about the aspects of the goddess from a poetical standpoint. In fact, his book was seen as a book of poetry and not officially taken as an authentic book of history. It was so influential on me that I found myself learning what is called the path of the bard, because I was, as a person, amazed at the power of nature and how it could influence one into trying to find a sense of your purpose and those energies combined together. My gift was after a while, and I kind of got touched by the gods, as it were, goddesses, when I was 20, I started to be able to rhyme things off the top of my head. So you might think me a rather sad group of person without a brain as I try and go ahead and do this refrain as I make up these words as I go along. And as you hear me, I'm not making up a song. But you could speak of all the great ones and all the silly ones and the knaves, but I don't hold a candle to the great Robert Graves.
Oh my gosh, I'm going to snap at that one. And I hope that I get to bet on you at the next poetry slam you participate in. That was really, really cool. I had way more elementary questions to ask, such as, are there any dietary restrictions for pagans, or is that just another, it kind of depends on your pantheon and your practice and where you are in the world?
Believe it or not, I've run into a number of people who choose to be vegetarians, but that's by choice, not restricted and apart. Oh, I got a cat on my leg here. I'm going to pull up a cat here in a second that wants to be
Be nice to it.
Carrie, come over here. Where'd you go, kitty? I got a cat. Oh, well. After 4 or 5 clawings, I have to give her attention. She's blind, by the way. I'll pick her up here and show it to you in a second if I can find her. Dietary restrictions, none that I'm aware of, unless someone wants to be a vegetarian. We don't have any restrictions as to like the laws of kashrut or other faiths that are not allowed to eat certain things. I understand the Buddhist faith, total vegetarianism, staying away from even anything that was once living. And for that reason, I found the cat. And for that reason, we don't have dietary restrictions except personal choice on vegetarianism. That's a short answer.
Okay. No, I love that. And I really appreciate everybody staying a minute over, and Reverend Darren, you giving us some extra time and answering so much so completely that I feel like I have a better understanding of paganism walking away from today's presentation than I had walking in. I certainly, a lot of those myths that you were listing, I believe probably at least 75% of them before this. So thank you for being our Mythbuster tonight. I appreciate it. Again, thank you to you, Reverend Darren, and thank you to all who were able to join in this meeting tonight. Remember, as you can see in the chat box, ISBA is a nonprofit organization and depends on the financial support from this local community to continue its good work. If you would like us to bring more programming like this one's tonight to you, please click on the link that is in the chat box right now, or you can go to isbaaz.org. Azra, pipe in if I got that website address incorrectly. I think I did it correctly. Our next ILM Circle workshop will be on Tuesday, July 25th, The Birth of Women's Ordination in the Rabbinate, presented by Rabbi Alana Hunter, right here on Zoom. So please look for upcoming events on our website and also on our Facebook page. Until then, stay safe and healthy. Be nice to the animals and do what you want, but don't hurt anybody else. Good night, everyone.